Welcome to The Truth for the October 25th edition. We are so glad to have you here, and we really appreciate your listening to us and watching us every Saturday. There's so many ways you can do that. You can listen on the John Fredericks Media Network. The ways to do that are tune in to one of his 22 AM and FM radio stations up and down the East Coast, or you can get the John Fredericks app from the App Store on either Apple or Google. Download that, and you can listen to us anywhere in the world that you have a network or an internet connection. And, of course, you can also catch the stream on the John Fredericks Media Network website. Just hit the live button, and we'll be right there waiting for you. We'll talk about other places that you can join us, but I really like when people tune in on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, X, or Getter, because we live stream there and you can get our video, you can get our graphics, and on Getter, you can even interact with us and tell me what a brilliant, insightful person I am, or tell me when I'm full of it. I don't care. Call me by my name, call me by a profanity, whatever. Just get my name spelled right. No, I'm joking, but everything is fair game. Look, this is Political Opinion Hour, 2 hours, and my goal is to tell the truth, and I work really hard to do that. But that does not mean there is not a guarantee that I don't make mistakes, and it's up to you to point them out to me. So you can do that in the comments on Getter or X, or you can leave comments on YouTube, or you can always write to me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. All right, well, we've got another horrible show for you this week. I would go weed the garden, cut the grass, do something, go watch paint dry, because you don't want to stick around for this. It's just going to be horrible. I'm waiting for another podcaster to open their show that way. I don't think it's going to happen. No, I think we got a good show for you today. We've got some great guests. We got Chris Hoare. He is talking to us about how the government shutdown not only affects our federal government employees, but how it affects our national security and our cybersecurity in particular. Then we've got Dick Eady. He is an economist as well as a professor at Florida Gulf Coast University. I'm going to say today what I don't normally do, but I'm going to be critical of our 47th President of the United States. Why am I doing that? I got a score to settle. No, not even close. I am totally devoted to Donald J. Trump and his administration. But I am not blindly loyal. And there's some things that I'm not simpatico about. It's not that I'm not simpatico. It's just that, I'm not really comfortable with the way that it has been done. What am I talking about? Well, let's start with the Jacqueline Kennedy Rose Garden. To me, that is an important, iconic part of the U.S. history. Now, Donald Trump, I believe, seemingly on his own volition, if you're on Rumble or Getter or our social media, you can see the Jacqueline Kennedy Rose Garden that we put up there next to the new Rose Garden Club. I don't like the name. This is not, folks, it's a club for senators and congressmen. I hate the optics. I'm sorry, Mr. President. This is the people's house. It is not a place for an exclusive club. Now, if you say it's the people's club and you want to invite ordinary citizens and give them a chance to come in, great. I'm all about it. But creating a private club on the grounds of the people's house, I'm sorry. It just doesn't sit well with me. You don't like it? Well, guess what? I don't like it. And the fact of the matter is, it's all been done with private money. Thank you very much. We're grateful for that. But still, it should not be an act of fiefdom. It should not be because the President of the United States has decreed it. And in the process, wipe out the Jacqueline Kennedy Rose Garden. Now, it looks like they've preserved a little bit of it maybe on one side, which I think is nice. And I'm not opposed to the terrace. I really think that change is the only constant that we have in life. So I get change, and a lot of people don't like change, and I'm open to change. I really like the fact. Here's the flip side of what I just said. I like the fact that there is a place in inside a public institution where members of Congress and the administration can come and mingle outside of the glare of the lights of the media and outside the confines of the Congress, and just get out of the pressure cooker and go sit there on that what looks like a beautiful terrace. Hey, Anthony, it looks a lot like the terrace at Mar-a-Lago, doesn't it? You got that one up there. Oh, same umbrellas, same white furniture. Looks like Trump North. Okay. Well, I don't have any problem with Trump having his own private residence and private club at that residence, but this is the presidency of the United States and the home of the president. I'm raising an objection. I don't even know why I'm objecting. It actually turned out to be quite spectacular. It's beautiful. Put it back up there, Anthony, on the screen. But you have to admit, it looks like Mar-a-Lago without the palm trees, doesn't it? And without the ocean. Well, or the intercoastal, as that might be. That aside, it's beautiful. I like the idea that congressmen and members of the administration can come and mingle. I doubt if members of the Supreme Court would ever show up there. But I get the idea. Just please drop the club. This is not a club. This is where serious business should be conducted, not in a club where I'm thinking that there's going to be alcohol. It's okay. I drink. Make no bones about it. No secret of it. It's just, look, Mr. President, I love you. I truly love you like a brother, and I really love you like our president. That's how I really love you. We're not brothers. We have a relationship, but not a relationship like brothers. But I do feel a kinship towards you, as I think most Americans do. You have matured into a fatherly figure for our country. Now you got to act like it. You got to act presidential. I mean, the thought that there's going to be a disco ball and a DJ there, kind of like Mar-a-Lago, just doesn't go over well with me. But that's just me. I'm not saying what you have to do. I'm just calling balls and strikes. I don't know what you do. You call it the White House Terrace, I'm fine with that. And you can write the rules for any way you want to. Within reason, you can write them for members of Congress and certain members of your administration. I think it would be great for the country's business to be transacted in a less pressure cooker environment. So I'm quibbling. I'm splitting hairs. I know that, and I admit it. But here's my point. You get blasted, Mr. President, for lacking presidential behavior. Act presidential. Act presidential. So it's not the Rose Garden Club. It's the White House Rose Garden Terrace. Need I say more? Now, President Trump is also building a spectacular ballroom. And that ballroom is going to be built all through donations, no public funds. Who could turn that down? And it will not alter the appearance of the East Wing. That's what we were told, and this is what we're getting. So we're going to build this elaborate, beautiful ballroom. And it is, I think, going to end up like the Rose Garden Club. I think it is going to end up like Mar-a-Lago's ballroom. That is my prediction. I've not seen renderings of it, but Anthony's job secure for another week. If you're on the live stream, here is what the construction looks like and what they have done to the East Wing. Does that look to you like they're not going to alter the East Wing? All right, that's my beef, and this is a serious beef. They have decimated the East Wing. They've removed the east portico of the White House, and that is objectionable to me. Now, we haven't been shown how they're going to put it back, but we were told that they would not in any way deface the East Wing. Well, there you go. If that ain't defacement, I don't know what it is, and I don't like it. But I will stand patiently and wait the final product. I mean, I'm building a new house in West Palm Beach, and I had a couple of people actually come up to me recently and say, you know, for the longest time, I didn't know what the hell you were doing. I wasn't feeling it. But now that the windows and doors are in, I see exactly where you were headed, and it's beautiful. So I should not prejudge a painting before it is finished. I guess I'm just sounding the warning signal that, again, this is the people's house. I don't think that it should be reconstructed or redesigned or altered without some kind of a process that involved the opportunity for stakeholders and people who really know what the hell they're doing, historians, architects, people that have a reputation as the best for design, without them weighing in on it. Now, maybe you'd have that. Maybe that's what's happened and we just don't know it. But I can't find anything in the public domain that suggests that. It looks like this was all choreographed and drawn in a back room somewhere and then thrust upon the people's house. And that's my beef. This is not Mar-a-Lago. This is not Bedminster. This is not Trump Tower. This is not Trump International Golf Course. This is the White House, property of the people of the United States of America. They should have a voice. There should be a process by which we redesign it. Maybe there was, and I just don't know it, but I am a little bit concerned because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And in my mind, the White House is one of the most iconic, beautiful, special places in the world. And it has been built, and it has been burned down, and it has been rebuilt, and it has been stripped to the bare bones and reconstructed. Who did that? I think Truman did, didn't he? I'm pretty sure it was Truman. He lived in the Hay Adams house, I think, across the street, basically for 4 years. He didn't occupy the White House while they effectively took it down to its bones and then reconstructed it because it had gotten to be 100 years old and was rotting and decaying and falling apart. And when Donald Trump became president in 2017, he found the conditions to be similar. And he did, to his credit, do a lot of work to remodel and restore the White House, especially in those areas where it was in decline. So kudos and thank you for that. I think that was done at the government's expense. Doesn't matter. Legit. Absolutely. Preserve this treasure for the American people. But I'm worried about the ballroom. Now look, we probably need a ballroom. They have what is it? The stateroom? Is that what they call it? The East Room? It is a ballroom where that have hosted many historical and significant events. It is the location where we entertain foreign leaders in state dinners, and it is a place where presidents have entertained. When the Reagans were in office, they used to have notable performers come and perform. Ms. Reagan actually had a lovely voice, and she would sing. She would sing to the president. Those occasions were spectacular. They were beautiful and in wonderful good taste. Is this the ballroom? Is that the, huh? Oh, so on the screen now is the ballroom at Mar-a-Lago. I predict that the new White House ballroom will have many similar elements. This ballroom is a Donald Trump creation. You know, here it is. We're 15 minutes into the broadcast, and I'm really talking about trivia. I'm really talking about trivial things. So let me wrap it up. But it's trivial, but it's not. It's not because President Trump had demonstrations against him across America, calling him a king. We don't have a monarch in this country. A king, I mean, if Prince Charles or if King Charles wanted to redecorate Buckingham Palace, he would have to ask permission of no one. That is his family's property. He is the king. They have a monarchy. Sorry, we don't. And any effort to move our great, wonderful system of government in that direction, I think should be resisted. I truly do. And this smacks to me of being a bit of a king. Oh, we're going to create a new Rose Garden Club, and it's going to look like Mar-a-Lago. And now we're going to create a new ballroom because we need it. And I agree, it's going to hold 800 people. No problem. We need a larger facility. The state room or the East Room. What the heck is it, Anthony? Will you look it up for me? I've been there. I've been to that room. I've sat in that room, but I don't remember the name of that room. I'm all over it, but I don't think I've hit the bullseye. My point, it holds 200 people, maybe 225 if you count standing room. We need a larger room. For the country's grown. You know, when this ballroom, when the East Room or the State Room, whatever room was built, the country was smaller, about a third the size, I believe. Yeah, the state dining. No, that's not it. That's the state dining room. That's almost a small private dining room. This is the room that's part of the White House in the East Wing. Forgive me. One of the costs of subscribing and listening to The Truth is you got to put up with a senile old man. I'm 72 and my brain's pretty good, but it's not quite as sharp as it maybe used to be. I have these little moments. Anyway, the ballroom, I'm sure, will be elegant. I'm sure that it will be beautiful in the eyes of people who like a lot of gold and glitter. Personally, not my taste. Nobody asked my opinion. But I am a citizen of this country. I am a taxpayer of this country. I don't expect to have a seat at the table, but I do expect someone representing our collective interest to have a seat at that table and not produce something that's going to be gold, glittery. And I'm sure that some people will think that it's not attractive. I've been to the ballroom at Mar-a-Lago many, many times. That's not how I would have designed it. A lot of people disagree. It's got beautiful crystal chandeliers, but there's just a lot of gold and opulence that look like more like what you would find in a monarch than in our White House. So I'm just pontificating and droning on. This is what President Trump, though, had to say about Obama's library.
They're also building the Obama Presidential Library. I'm wondering if you've
He
seen.
needs help.
Have you seen pictures of the architecture and
Yeah,
what
I
do you think
did.
of it?
It's not too pretty. No, but it's closed. It's stopped. They ran out of money. I mean, he's building a library slash museum. You know, you call it some museum, and usually they call it library and museum. That's the official name. And they're stuck. And he wanted only women and DEI to build it. Well, that's what they got. I built a great building in Chicago, as you know, a big, beautiful building, one of the tallest buildings in the country. And we got it built very quickly, very well. And we used the construction workers of Chicago. They're great workers. They're great construction people. And I suggest that he get them involved. But they're hundreds of millions of dollars over budget. And I think it stopped. I'm reading these terrible stories. But that's the way our country was run under President Obama, too. Nobody knew it.
All right, so it appears that Jan Anthony is right. It is the state dining room in the east wing of the White House that I was trying to get. We hit all around it. I just wasn't sure. Anyway, so the reason I played that clip is that, you know, what Obama likes is different than what Trump likes. What Trump likes might be different than what Obama likes. I can tell you that through multiple visits and tours of the White House, I think it is an absolutely spectacularly tasteful, beautiful structure that I would not want changed. And I would like for the ballroom, which I'm very grateful for. And the fact that President Trump has donated himself handsomely, I'm sure, and then gone out and raised the balance of it to produce a $150 million ballroom. What ingrate would sit here and criticize the ballroom? I'm not criticizing the notion of the ballroom. I'm warning about perhaps my discomfort with the implementation of the ballroom. But, you know, someday we might have another president and they can redecorate the ballroom. I would just hope that it would be in keeping with what I would have done had I been president. I would have built a bigger state dining room and annexed it onto the east room. I would not have ripped off the east portico, and I would have figured out how to have gotten it done on the grounds, or I may have elected to have moved it to the grounds of the executive office building, or maybe even the Treasury, so that this national treasure is left intact. So I don't know. I doubt if anybody that works in the Trump administration, I'm sure, has either turned the radio off by now or thrown it across the room and crashed it into the wall and said, forget that crazy lunatic old man, what he thinks. But if you are still listening, there is time. There is still time to develop this ballroom in the character of the People's House, and I hope that you do. Now, I said that if we ever should get another president, I don't know that that's going to be anytime soon. Here's Steve Bannon.
Well, he's going to get a third term. So Trump 28. Trump is going to be president 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is. But there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28. We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president of the United States. We have to finish what we started. And the way we finish it through Trump. Trump is a vehicle. I know this will drive you guys crazy, but he's a vehicle of divine providence. He's an instrument. He's very imperfect. He's not churchy, not particularly religious, but he's an instrument of divine will, and you could tell this of how he's pulled this off. We need him for at least one more term, right? And he'll get that in 28.
George Washington could have easily had a third term. People in this country absolutely loved and adored him. He imposed his own self-discipline and said 2 terms is enough. I've done my civic duty. I've gotten older now, and it's time for me to exit the stage and let someone else come and carry the torch. Now, the only person ever to serve in the presidency in non-consecutive terms was Grover Cleveland. And he did, in fact, serve was elected to 2 4-year terms. I think he died in his second term, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't he die? No, I think he became ill. I'm sorry. He became ill in his second term, much like Joe Biden did. No, that's Woodrow Wilson. And Woodrow Wilson's wife, like Joe Biden, ran the country behind the scenes. Anyway, so Grover Cleveland, I may be confusing my presidents a little bit. Grover Cleveland, I know, was elected to 2 terms. Did he serve out the full second term? Something in the back of my mind tells me maybe not. But anyway, it doesn't matter. That's cool. And Trump has broken new ground by being reelected to a second term after having taken a 4-year hiatus. So, Steve Bannon, I mean, we will disclose that at an appropriate time, and we will tell you the plan. Who in the hell is we? Dude, you're a podcaster. You used to work in the White House. You alienated Trump. I don't even know whether he lets you in the door or not anymore. But, you know, he's such a pompous ass saying, we will let you know at an appropriate time, like he is back there pulling the strings. I don't think that that's the case, but maybe I'm wrong. Look, I think Steve is brilliant. I think he's arrogant. I think he's smart. I think he's pompous. I think he brings a lot to the national conversation. That interview just didn't sit well with me, though, the way that he presented it. But I'm just quibbling with everybody today. But in the big scheme of things, I think he's absolutely right. And here's how I come down on it. Trump was denied his second term in 2020. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'll carry it to my grave. 2020 was rigged. It was stolen. I say stolen. President Trump says rigged. I say the media lies. He calls it fake news. He gets elected president, and I don't. He has a really very clever way of presenting his ideas and his thoughts that don't really trigger people. They're not combative, you know? Calling somebody a liar is different than saying, oh, you're full of it. Fake news. That's not as incendiary as you're a liar. So, I mean, I think I've studied Trump. I think he's very good and very crafty in the way that he conveys his messages. And they usually end up with, well, we'll just have to see. We'll just have to wait and see how it goes. But so this notion of term limits became a constitutional amendment following Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 4 4-year terms, 16 years as president. And someone said, it was one of the founders who said that we need limitations on a president's term lest they become a monarch. I don't think we want a monarch. Mr. President, I would urge you not to behave as a monarch. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So ultimately, the framers approved 4-year terms with no restrictions on how many times a person could be elected president. Now, George Mason denounced the notion of life tenure, which was actually endorsed by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. They thought lifetime tenure for presidents was a good thing. But George Mason denounced that and said that life tenure proposals was tantamount to elective monarchy. And that's where I got that from. So then Ronald Reagan came along, and he said he felt like you should elect a president to 1 6-year term. And that had a lot of appeal to me. But I think really, things change. This again, when George Washington and James Marshall and Alexander Hamilton, all these fellows were around, the country was so much smaller, and the federal government was probably less than the size of today's agricultural department. I mean, it was small. And service in Congress was a part-time job. And the White House was actually just wide open. Anybody who wanted to could just walk up, open the front door, and walk in. And who knows, they may have found President Lincoln roaming around. They may have had an encounter with him. Things have changed. We have created a monster. And this monster is fed with taxpayer dollars, and that's coming straight from you and I. So what was good in the 1700s and late 1700s and throughout the 1800s just does not work today, and it's become so complex. I mean, just look at the difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0. I mean, it really is the difference between a rookie on a college football team in the first administration, at least in the first half of it. He was so naive, and so was I. I mean, I didn't object to what he was doing. It's only in hindsight that we can look back on it and realize that some of the people that he picked for cabinet positions and for key positions in his administration were not good picks. Rex Tillerson was a great CEO of Exxon, but he was a horrible lieutenant. And when you take a cabinet position, like it or not, you are there at the pleasure of the President of the United States. Ergo, you do whatever the hell they tell you to do. And if you don't like it, you've got two choices. Suck it up, be a big boy, and soldier on, or send in your letter of resignation. Well, he did neither, and Trump fired him. Kudos. And then there were other examples of that, too. He had a communications specialist, Scarmati, I can't remember. He lasted about 2 months. And then he had, I think he had 3 different chiefs of staff that he put his trust and faith in. I know he had Mark Meadows, and then he had the general, and before that, he had the guy that had been there at the head of the RNC, who turned out to be a complete disaster. He was ill prepared for the job. So I consider really Trump's first 2 years as his rookie years. And then he got promoted to first string. And I thought he did a fabulous job. And he sort of started to figure Washington out, and really started to figure out how to maneuver Washington. I think having Mark Meadows on his team really was a big, huge advantage, because Mark Meadows was a Republican leader in the House, and he came over to the White House, and I think he was intensely loyal to Trump. I mean, I saw Trump and Mark Meadows together on a couple of occasions, and I really felt the chemistry between them, the kinship between them. Trump in his speeches would recognize Mark, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Mark Meadows several times. We've had several very pleasant conversations. I have tremendous respect and admiration for him, and I think so did Trump, and I think Trump was well served by Mark Meadows. But you have to remember, those first 2 years were turbulent and a little chaotic. We had Amoresco, is that her name? From the Real Apprentice? What was her name? Omarosa? That was it. She was a lunatic. And he had her in the communications office. She created all kinds of dissension in the White House. And, you know, she had an open door policy to the president. That didn't work so well. So he got rid of Omarosa. And there was just, you know, kind of a revolving door there. Susie Wiles, the current chief of staff, hope I don't jinx her, but she's sharp. She is smart, and she is tough. She creates order and discipline, and I think a healthy respect among the White House personnel, and I think she has been a great stabilizing force for the administration. She is Pat Summerall's daughter. So she had a glimpse of what it was like to be in the spotlight, and she's been a Republican operative for many years. She and Ron DeSantis knew each other and worked together, and are no longer simpatico. They do not like each other. But regardless, Susie is a very skilled person and knows politics inside and out. So I think Trump, I'm getting to a point, bear with me. I think Trump learned how to be president in his first term. I hadn't really learned how to be presidential, but we're working on that. I think he came in his second non-consecutive term a much wiser person. And I think that 4-year hiatus really gave him a time of reflection and real thought, developing a strategy and a course for our nation and a means to get there. And I agree with Steve Bannon. 4 years is not enough. I think two things are going to happen. I think that the Voter Rights Act of 1964 is going to be rejected by the Supreme Court of the United States in its January term. I think the tail wagging the dog will cease to exist. I think taxation without representation will cease. I think that one person, one vote will return to be the principle by which we govern our republic. And I think this disproportionate voice that we give and power that we've given to minorities in this country are about to come to a screeching halt. I believe that we will see a redrawing of the congressional maps across the country. We've already seen the prototype. That happened in North Carolina just recently when the legislature reapportioned the state and redrew the maps, and Republicans picked up one district. I think that Florida, maybe Georgia, some northeastern states will follow suit, and we will find and Texas, we will find that Republicans deserve, based on the Constitution of the United States, fair representation. You know, there's a map of New England, and you can see that the population is almost equally divided, but the proportion of Republicans and Democrats is 60-40 Dems to Republicans. How many congressional seats do you think are in the northeast section of our country? The answer is 0. All these states, Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Vermont, New York. I mean, you look at the map, they've got 40% of the population, yet, well, now New York, I should not include in that because they do have Republicans. But north of New York, there are no Republicans. None. Yet they make up 40% of the country, of that region. What is the rationale? Tell me, make an intellectual argument why that should allow to be happen. Well, we're going to change it, and the Supreme Court's going to be the ones to do it. And they've proven that they're willing to tackle the tough decisions. They showed that in Roe v. Wade when they struck it down. And I think they're on the verge of striking down the Voting Rights Act of 1964. And I think the Democrats are in a state of panic because the only thing they know to do is to lie and tell you things that you know and that they know are untruthful. Russia, who took down Building 7. I mean, you know, inflation is transitory. Joe Biden is perfectly fine. Nothing to see here. Move on. The American people, and thanks to Donald Trump, he has awakened us. He awakened us to the fake news media. And I really, you know, I grew up with Walter Cronkite, Huntley and Brinkley, Peter Jennings. I love those guys. I trusted those guys. And I think they deserved it. I think they earned the trust. But these guys now, forget it. They're leftist, lunatic, biased journalists that to a large part are the spokespeople for the Democratic Party. And guess what? I don't know how we're going to reconcile that. Let's deal with the Congress first. The Voting Rights Act of 1964, I predict is going to be struck down, and we're going to redraw the maps in these important states. Republicans are going to pick up more seats. The House, thank you to the Democrats for keeping the government closed, because there isn't a right-thinking person in America, Republican, Democrat, Christian, agnostic, Jew, Catholic, it does not matter. What they are doing is wrong. And they know it's wrong, and they know that it's for political advantage, and they have said so. Chuck Schumer, that delightful individual, said the longer that this shutdown goes, the better it is for us. Who is us? The Democrats. How about the American people, Chucky? Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? Well, he had a period of lucidity in the last continuing resolution, and he came around and allowed the Senate to bring the filibuster to a close, bring the continuing resolution up, and it passed 52 to 48, I think. And Chuck got a mountain of grief. Why did he succumb to the grief? Well, for one reason, he was placating the left liberal elements of his party, which elected him in New York. And he didn't want to give up his seat. I say tough. This is a representative form of government. You're there to represent and do what is in the best interest of your constituents. Second, the American people first. And you, sir, your priority is somewhere way down the list. It doesn't make the top 10. Because you're no George Washington, sir. You don't have the humility, the dignity, and the loyalty and the patriotism to risk stepping down, because that's all you've got in life. And you don't want to give it up. And you're willing to drag the American people down and hurt our nation so you and your cronies can maintain what little power they have left. And that's why the Supreme Court is going to rule. And that's why the Voting Rights Act is over. And that's why we're going to get back to one man, one vote. Except today it's one person, one vote. And it ain't illegal immigrants. The whole Democrat strategy is coming down. The house of cards is collapsing. The final straw, I think, will come in January. and deservedly. This isn't a biased or a partisan statement I'm making. I'm making this statement based on what I see is right, based on the Constitution of the United States, 200 years of precedent until 1964, when we passed the Voting Rights Act, and it was legitimate and justified then. 60 years later, not. No longer. Minorities in this country have had every opportunity that they could avail themselves of. We have given them free food, free clothing, free housing, free Obama phones, free education, free babies. If you have a baby, we'll pay you. It's lunacy. The policies are wrong. Now, ask me if I'm mean-spirited and lack charity in my heart, and the answer is no. I've donated, I've worked, I've given of myself for my fellow human man. I believe totally in helping people that are unprepared or unable to help themselves. Starting with our veterans, by the way, who have come back from fighting with PTSD. And that's one of the topics that we're going to talk to our guest about today, Steve Bonta, the publisher of the New York American Magazine, published by the John Birch Society, for which he writes. And then we've got an interview coming up in conjunction with Veterans Day, where we talk about veterans in particular and PTSD. So there you have it, the world according to John. Will Trump get a third term? I don't know, but I do think that there is a very strong possibility. He's got the smartest people in the country working on it. Everything that Trump has wanted, he seems to have been able to find a way to get it. I've had no issue with it, other than maybe the Rose Garden Club and the new ballroom that I'm sure is going to be gaudy. But that's okay. Those are my personal, preferences. I don't get to make those calls. But I just hope the president will exercise some discipline and get really people to work on these projects that do really understand the White House and it's the genre that it represents, the aura that accompanies it. And I don't want to see that in any way cheapened or diminished. All right, I digress. Back to the subject at hand. Do I think President Trump is going to get a third term? I do. Do I want President Trump to get a third term? 1,000%. Do I want it to create a precedent for the future where other people can get 3 terms? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Maybe we could come up with a mechanism by which some percentage of the country wants it, and our representative republic form of government would permit it. I don't know how you would orchestrate that. I can think of some scenarios, but there are probably 1,000 reasons not to do what I would think about. Maybe it would be unworkable. But look, here is where I'm coming from. Trump was on the road. Our economy was humming. Crime was coming down. Employment was at record lows. Minority employment was at record highs. Things were good. But I don't think Trump had really figured out the international stage. I don't think he realized how demonic China really is. Now, there are parts of China that are very good, but there's a big component of China that I do not trust and I do not like, just like with Russia, in a different vein with Iran, in a similar vein, maybe, who would I put in that category? Iraq, Afghanistan. Well, the terrorist states where terrorists are kind of running the show overtly or covertly. But China is more than a competitor. They spy on us. They have police stations open in the United States, ostensibly to look at their own people who may be threats to their country. I don't think that should be allowed. The spy balloons, the fentanyl, the military-aged men they sent across our southern border, I'm not down with those things. And I think we were all a bit naive. I think Peter Schweitzer helped open our eyes to China. I think Gordon Chang has helped open our eyes. I think General Robert Spalding has helped open our eyes. And today, there is a healthy distrust of China. I don't think that was true in Trump 1.0. So I am getting to the point that we've got a seasoned, really smart, in good health president who has worked so hard and tirelessly 18 hours a day. I don't even think he sleeps. I don't know. They say 4 hours, maybe 6 hours on a good day. But he has sacrificed so much. I think we owe it to ourselves to give him a second term, if for no other reason than to be able to deconstruct the deep state. And that's why I want him to get a second or a third, but a consecutive term, so he can finish the job we've started. Now, Canada's all up in arms because they ran this ad and Trump don't like it. Hear the words of our former president, Ronald Reagan, on tariffs.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Man, do I miss that guy. Well, he had, they called him the great communicator. He had one of the greatest spirits of anybody I've ever seen. I met him one time for about a minute in the Atlanta airport when I was in college. I was on the way back to school after a break, and we had a chance encounter. They used to call it the Crown Room, the Delta Crown Room, and when it was really special. And he and Ms. Reagan were there making a connecting flight. He was not president then. He was running for president, I think, for his first time against George Bush, if memory serves. He lost that election. He was a tall, handsome, broad-shouldered guy. He talked about standing tall. Now, you want to talk about presidential? Let's just start there. Ronald Reagan was presidential. And everybody can't be presidential. And so I don't think that we have to expect anyone to live up to Ronald Reagan's stature, although it would be nice, because he was also tough. He showed us his toughness when the air traffic controllers went on strike. And he said, fine, you got until 5 o'clock Monday to come back to work, and if you don't, you're fired. And they thought he was bluffing. He wasn't bluffing. He released thousands of air traffic controllers. So I just say all that to tell you that that's one reason that my son named one of our dogs Reagan, and he was one of my favorite dogs. Dale Carnegie said, give a dog a good name. Oh my gosh, did we give that dog a good name. And he could have been presidential. He was the sweetest, kindest, most gentle dog. And I just miss Reagan so much. Anyway, this is what older people do. They get on these tangents and lead you in a different direction, but I'm coming full circle back to the point that I'm trying to make. As much as I loved and respected Ronald Reagan, by the way, Canada played that clip as a commercial in Canada. And it really made President Trump mad. And just today, or Friday, yesterday, as a result of that commercial, Trump said, that's it. We cut off all trade discussions with Canada. Because here's what that great president, who also took a bullet for us, by the way. You may recall John Hinckley tried to assassinate President Reagan, although that too is questionable, whether it was John Hinckley or John Hinckley acting alone, or whether there was a second shooter. Roger Stone says that there was. He says that there was a shooter on top of the porte cochere at the Washington Hilton Hotel, and that people pointed to up on top of the roof when shots were fired, but we'll save that for another time. I'm just saying, as much as I respect President Reagan, and as much as I wish he was still with us, I think he missed a point. And I think he got it wrong. While a lot of what he said in that clip is right, he overlooks one key important point that he doesn't discuss. And that is that trade has to be fair. He used those words. He said to have fair trade. Well, I'm here to submit to you that there is nothing fair about Canada taxing automobiles that are made in the United States and transported and imported into Canada, and them slapping a 25% tariff on them, yet we let their products come into our country tariff-free. And that applies to other goods and services that Canada imports from the United States as well. So President Trump isn't being punitive. He isn't trying to say, you know, we're going to hurt you by putting on these tariffs. You don't want tariffs? Simple. Take your tariffs off American products. No problem. But they're like spoiled children. They've gotten addicted to the money, no different than a heroin addict. And they enjoyed a free ride for 50 or 60 years, and now the party is over, and President Trump is saying, look, you may have justifiably had a disproportionate balance of trade and a disproportionate standard for trade, i.e. you could tariff us, but we couldn't tariff you. But look, whatever those reasons were, they're over. And you've heard me say here that just like in Europe, the EU, we justifiably subsidized the EU after World War II because it was devastated by Hitler, who burned a lot of Europe and destroyed a lot of Europe, not the least of which was London. I don't know if you've ever toured the museum in London, but there is a World War II museum that showed the bunkers that were in London where Churchill and his generals convened, and they conducted their war efforts from there. And there's a historical remembrance of the destruction that occurred in London and all across Europe. And they owe the United States a debt of gratitude, because without us, they would have probably fallen, and they would be flying the German flag right now. And all of Europe would look much differently than it does today, where people are able to live in mostly free societies. And I just got back from Europe. I mean, you can go anywhere you want in Europe, and they may stop you and stamp your passport, or they may not. And they sure don't inspect your luggage. Much like we travel in the United States. It's very similar. But when you come back in the United States, they're going to ask you 20 questions, and if they don't like your answers, they're going to search your luggage. But the EU enjoys a lot of the same freedoms that we do, and that includes the freedom to cross borders unobstructed and without a lot of fanfare. All right, so tariffs may have been justified after World War II. We were willing and generous to pay them when we bought their products. But there's no justification today for Germany to be able to tariff a Ford or a Chevrolet built in the United States that's shipped to Germany because somebody wants it. And then we take BMWs and Mercedes tariffs free in this country? Can somebody help me understand why that's right? And I don't think it's tariffs free. I think we tariffed them at 10%. They tariffed us at 25. Trump said, "Look, you tariff us at 25, we're tariffing you at 25." Help me understand why that's not fair. And then we have seen so much of our manufacturing gone offshore because of cheap labor and cheap no regulation and no barriers to entry. And it's just, President Reagan said it, fair trade. There's nothing fair about the trade that we have with people around the globe today. And it may have been justified 60 years ago. It is not justified in 2025. And that's what Trump is trying to correct. And I wholeheartedly support him and believe that what he is doing is correct. Manufacturing is flooding back into America. And it is going to create jobs. Our unemployment is going to fall, and our minority employment is going to rise, and these illegal immigrants are going to leave, and that will also create more jobs for Americans, even though I don't think that we should preclude illegals from working in this country when employers like Mar-a-Lago cannot find servers in their restaurants or house keeping for their rooms, or construction workers for their building, or for other jobs where people just, we've advertised for jobs in my companies in Atlanta. I can't tell you how many times people make an appointment to come for an interview and then just don't show up. Why do they do that? So they can tell the unemployment people, the labor department, that they have looked for a job and can't find one and continue to get their unemployment. Where we're standing there with good money, ready to pay them, and they can't even show up for the interview. Forget that. Times have changed. It's time for every American able-bodied person to stand on their own 2 feet and support our country and support your families. That's what I believe. That's the way I roll. Hope you like it. If you don't, email me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. We're coming to you today sponsored by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. They're a restaurant services company in Atlanta, Georgia, and they pick up waste vegetable oil from restaurants, clean their grease traps, also sanitize the front of the house and the back of the house. They give good, clean, reliable service. They've been in business for over 15 years. They've got hundreds of loyal customers throughout the metropolitan Atlanta area. And you can, if you're a restaurant owner, check them out at pcrenergy.com. Please tell them John Gordon sent you. And they'll give you good, reliable, clean service. No automated attendance, a customer service line that's operated 15 to 18 hours a day. And if they miss you in the middle of the night, they'll call you back by 7 a.m. the next morning. And they just do a wonderful job. We're coming to you today, as we do every Saturday, on the John Fredericks Media Network across their 22 AM and FM stations in 8 cities, and ranging from Nashville and Atlanta all the way up to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Morgantown, West Virginia, and Lynchburg, Virginia, Richmond, and Norfolk. And we appreciate you all so much. And if you're watching us today or listening to us on the radio today, we invite you to come over and interact with us live on Getter, where you can interact with us on the live stream. You can also watch us on YouTube Live, Rumble Live, Facebook Live, and on X. You can comment there and leave us some comments. We read them. I promise you I do. And I let you know that because I either give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or I'll leave you a comment. You can also see all of our past episodes by visiting johngordon.tv. You can also follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, Getter, and Truth Social. And if you like to listen to podcasts, we're there too. Spotify, our iHeart's podcast, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music. So we are all across the web. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. I mean this sincerely. I have asked you all to come and subscribe to us. Our channels are growing. If you're listening on the radio and you'd like to help us, go to one of those online streaming services, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, X, or Getter, and subscribe to the John Gordon Truth channel. And I'll be so grateful to you. That really allows us to reach a broader audience. I had a call from a friend of mine in Florida just last week. Said, "Hey, do you have are you online? Do you have a podcast?" And I said, "Yes, we do. It's called The Truth with John Gordon." And he said, "Well, you just popped up in my feed," and I subscribed. So that's what we're after. We don't make any money on it. Maybe someday we could, but we don't now because we're too small. And it's not about the money. It's about the reach. I really want to enhance the size of our megaphone because I think I have something to say that is worth listening to. Obviously, you folks do because you keep coming back and you send me really sweet, nice messages. And I appreciate that. I truly do. Help us grow this channel. Tell your friends, relatives, parishioners, neighbors to check us out, John Gordon Truth, on all of those social media channels and the John Fredericks Media Network and CDM.press. They're a good partner of ours. They take our feed and put it out on their social media platforms, as well as their 13 digital platforms across the World Wide Web. They care about the truth just like we do, and that is the truth. And I'm John Gordon. Let's get to our first interview. Thank you for being with us today. Stay tuned now for our first interview. The government shutdown continues on. Meanwhile, Chris Hoare, who is a communications person for SAT 123, they do government contracting and they know what is on the inside, says that this is putting us at risk from a national security standpoint. Chris Hoare, welcome to The Truth, and explain yourself, please.
Well, thanks for having me on, John. It's great to be here. So what we've seen with the government shutdown is a couple of things. One, CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They're really the front line in defense against cyber attacks, whether they're coming internally or from around the world. And CISA coordinates information it receives about attacks and then passes that on to other government agencies, private corporations, and so on, so that they can either mitigate or stop attacks, hopefully, that are ongoing.
So tell us about SAT 123. How much do they have their tentacles inside our federal government?
Well, I mean, we're one of many providers of satellite communication services, including satellite phones as used by the U.S. military around the world, and satellite internet systems such as BGAN or Starlink. And essentially, our communication systems allow you to communicate when the regular infrastructure goes down. So when cell towers go down or fiber lines go down, satellite phones and satellite internet units keep working because they don't rely on any kind of ground-based infrastructure, John.
Well, we just saw Starlink, SpaceX launch a heavy Falcon rocket this week, and they carried into space a number of Starlink transmitters, receivers, satellite dishes. Were you involved with that at all?
No, not us directly, but of course we do provide all the Starlink services from the units that you can install in your house or car, portable units, and then we can activate those for you. So, if you have a Starlink unit, and we have units that are free with activation, unlike anyone else, but you can pay from, 150, $200 a month and on up to get high-speed internet access no matter where you are. John, we've become very reliant on our cell phones and our internet connectivity, and not just as individuals, but companies as well, and of course governments. So when those infrastructures are affected or go down, it can put you in real jeopardy. Either personal safety can be in jeopardy, or your business can be in jeopardy, of course, if it's not connected to the internet. So that's what we try and mitigate by providing handsets and internet connectivity units, which we can also install on cars, buses, planes, boats, that kind of thing, or buildings. We have our units installed in refineries, radio stations, etc., throughout the country, all with an eye to basically having a fully reliable, redundant system. Or, of course, there are many people who are in areas where they don't have either good or any kind of connectivity from a ground-based point of view or cellular point of view. So we can keep you connected wherever you are, because the fact is that only 7% of this country, for example, is covered by a cell phone service on a good day when everything's working.
Wow, that's amazing. 7%.
Yeah.
And I just traveled through Europe, and internet and cell coverage is, I wouldn't say spotty, but it's nothing like it is in the US. I was really surprised.
Yeah,
So-
we're very spoiled here.
And we take a lot for granted. There's no question about it. So, are there other companies in addition to Starlink that have got satellites orbiting the globe for communications, internet, phone? What else?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big ones are Inmarsat and Iridium. Iridium, of course, is the original service that launched in the late 90s. But Inmarsat and Iridium provide global satellite phone service, as well as limited internet connectivity. The BGAN service provides full stream connectivity. It's quite expensive, though, but Starlink is certainly the best priced these days. And they're putting up more satellites every day, as we see with these rockets going up. But those are the big three. There are some other ones controlled by the Arab world that we don't mess around with particularly. But, Iridium and Inmarsat is the way to go for phone connectivity. And I would say Starlink is the way to go for internet, satellite internet. There are some European companies kind of emerging there, but, we stick with what works. Iridium, Inmarsat, and BGAN are our main ones.
Well, is there capacity in the skies? What sphere do these satellites travel in?
Well, I mean, some of them travel in the high Earth orbit. The Starlink's a little lower down. But when it comes to capacity, the Iridium network was built with over 70 plus satellites originally. I think they were thinking that everyone was going to have a satellite phone, and it didn't quite turn out that way. So there is a ton of capacity still available on both Iridium and Inmarsat. We got a long way to go before they max that out. And with the upgrades in the capabilities of satellites now, we're going to see a lot more connectivity, a lot quicker, and I would think cheaper even going forward.
Well, it seems to me, I mean, I don't know how much it costs to build a satellite and then launch it and then maintain it. I don't even know how you maintain it when it's up there, but I'm sure that people that are smarter than I have figured that out. But it eliminates all the fiber optic cable that we have spent a bloody fortune installing all across America. And then those ugly ass cellular towers, which I just hate seeing littering the landscape. So on a cost, performance, and benefit analysis, could satellites do it bigger, better for less?
Yeah, and I think they already are beginning to move into that phase. And over the next 10 years, I think we'll see. My guess is we'll see a big reduction in the number of cell towers as direct to satellite connectivity becomes more widely available.
So what about security? I would think that it would be maybe easier to hack than a traditional cellular signal, although with the advent of the FISA warrants, we found out that was very easy to hack.
Well, yeah, actually, it's funny you should bring this up, because just in this last week, we've seen a couple of studies come out from universities in California, I think San Diego in particular. And I won't name names, but what these guys did was they put an $800 dish on their roof, and they managed to intercept millions of lines of data and code being sent up to a cellular communications network. that was not encrypted somehow. The Iridium Inmarsat systems are encrypted, much harder to crack. Look, there are holes, but I would say the biggest threat to the security on the cellular side is the effort from the Chinese and others to hack the software, the control planes of towers, the backhaul fiber itself, because that's the lowest hanging fruit for our enemies is our infrastructure. There's no doubt. It costs a lot of money to send people, bombs, ships, planes, etc. But it's very cheap and very efficient to attack an infrastructure, unfortunately. And so we see a lot of these countries employ thousands or tens of thousands of people every day to do nothing but attack our infrastructure and try and steal and corrupt our data. The amount of cyber attacks coming from nation states as well as other bad actors is in the millions per day, whether they're phishing attacks or ransomware attacks. So our security as a whole is under constant threat, and it's a growing threat. That's why agencies like CISA are absolutely vital. And in my opinion, government shutdown or not, we seem to have them all the time now. CISA should not be affected by that. We don't shut off our battleships and turn them around because of government shutdown, quite rightly. But cyber warfare, is the front lines of modern warfare.
Well, I want to ask you one more question, then we'll get to the government shutdown in depth. You mentioned earlier planes. Now, on my flight to and from Europe, I had internet connection the whole way. I didn't think it was great, but it beat nothing. Talk to us about Sat123's products for airplanes. And I've got a small plane that I fly. Can I put a Sat123 transmitter and receiver in it and have internet and phone?
Yeah, we'd be happy to help you with that. We install on private planes, larger commercial planes. We have certified installers throughout the country and bonded who can do that kind of thing. We do a lot with ships as well. Obviously, anyone who's got a yacht or is a fisherman will tell you once you get more than a mile or two out to sea, your cell phone's not going to work. And certainly a lot of people are going a lot further out than that. So those guys, have relied on this kind of communication for a long time. But also American truckers, the great men and women who power this country will tell you. Again, they're out in these big freeways and they're not getting connectivity a lot of the time or most of the time. And if they break down, especially if they're in Death Valley or something, they can't afford to be sitting there waiting and hoping a truck's going to drive by. So for pretty much all industries, satellite communications, is a requirement in this area. But yeah, planes, boats, ships, you name it. And again, refineries, chemical plants, other industrial plants that are kind of away from larger populated areas use our services, and we install on them as well. And I believe you're familiar with, you work with John Fredericks, a friend of mine whose show I go on often. He's purchased Starlink units from us as either backup or primary service for his some of his stations because he, like the rest of us, can't afford to be disconnected for any amount of time.
It is fascinating as it is exciting. So let's talk about the government shutdown. Now, your focus is on CISA, and you're saying that the shutdown has effectively suspended CISA?
No, I mean, and we don't know exactly the numbers, but typically in a furlough situation, you're looking at 80 to 90% of workers that are not going to be, at work during the shutdown. I was just on their website, and they are not updating their site due to the shutdown. That says that right there on their front page. Undoubtedly, there are clearly still going to be some people there, but the problem is this is a massive problem, and I think they only employ a couple of thousand people on a full day, normal day. But again, with millions of attacks coming in daily, it's a big problem that they have to deal with even when they're fully staffed. The other thing that's happened, John, is that the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act expired on October the 1st, same day the shutdown started. And this act from 2018 was basically enabled private companies and organizations to share attack information with the government without fear of retribution through liability in the courts. And since that act has expired, companies are less willing to share information with the government from attacks they're seeing on their own infrastructure, again, through worries about liability. So, that's another problem that we have right now. And certainly, look, those who seek to do us harm across the world are paying attention. They follow American politics. And we saw immediately on October the 1st the amount of scanning activity that was going on U.S. sites and infrastructure went up, as we would expect, because they see an opportunity, they're going to try and take it.
Amazing. Well, I would just be astounded if our own federal government left us exposed in that way through the shutdown. I mean, to me, that would be more important perhaps than a standing military presence, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is at least as important given the kind of attacks we're in and given how much we rely on this. It's like, look, if you or I leave the house in the morning and we forget our phones, the first thing we do is turn around, go back and get them, right? We
100%.
can't be without just connectivity on a basic level, but on a bigger level, we've got our water supply, our air traffic control, our power grid, our telecommunications networks. All of these things completely rely on the cyber infrastructure. They're all connected, and if that infrastructure comes under attack, the results can be devastating. We saw earlier this year in Spain, the entire country went offline, and the Spanish authorities said it was, they just misdirected some power here, there, or otherwise. And I can't prove that didn't happen, but to me, it looked very much, had all the hallmarks of a cyber attack, where the electricity was essentially all diverted to one place. So it would just shut down everything. And they were offline. Their entire country was offline for over 24 hours. Banking systems, financial networks, communications, everything was offline. It was a complete and total blackout. And if it can happen there, John, it can happen here. We're not doing that much more, that much better than the Spanish are, so we have to be vigilant, but we have to be prepared for what, we're going to do if we face such an attack, which in Spain lasted just over 24 hours. But this kind of attack, if done right, could, go on for weeks or even longer.
So what should, for the benefit of our listeners, what should the average person do to protect their information? Passwords, I don't know, personal information. I mean, where are we vulnerable and what should we be doing?
Well, unfortunately, we're vulnerable at the most basic level. In data that was obtained from a recent attack of millions of records, nearly 50% of all the passwords that were stolen were the word password, right? So on a very basic, I mean, it doesn't take a genius hacker to to try that one. So we got to be much more vigilant about the passwords we use. We should be using two-stage verification wherever possible. All big services provide that. So someone can't just get your password. You'll get a text notification to your phone saying, "Are you sure you want? Here's your login code to get into your Gmail account," or whatever it is. These are kind of the basic steps. But above and beyond that, cybersecurity on the server level is a bigger problem, because even the companies that run the big data centers and networks, they get hacked. They're prone to this as well. And the reason, in my opinion, is that they're single points of failure. No matter how big a company is, if that company gets taken offline, if their data centers get taken offline, with that goes all of their clients. We need to be much more distributed with our data, and I think also with our infrastructure. The power grid in this country has so many single points of failure, and so until we start to decentralize and distribute our networks, we're going to remain vulnerable pretty much no matter what.
Well, thank you, Chris Hoare. That's a fascinating conversation. You've given us a lot of good knowledge and information that we can use in each of our individual cases. And I hope they will fix this government shutdown quickly, because according to you, it is leading us exposed to a certain degree. I can't remember the last time an actual attack was made on the United States. Most would say Pearl Harbor. I might include 9/11 as part of that. I'm not for sure, but this we know is happening on a daily basis. That in itself should be impetus for our leaders to fix this problem and get us back to a state of normalcy.
From from your lips, John, I totally agree. And hopefully, that's something that we'll see as a result of this. I know the President Trump administration is very focused on security, and hopefully this will become front and center for them as well, because it affects every single one of us.
Chris Hoare, he does communications and is a spokesperson for SAT 123. Thank you for coming on The Truth, and have a good rest of your weekend.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, John.
It's the economy, stupid. That's what we're told every day. Yet it's up one day, down the next. Jerome Powell is too slow. Others say that he got it just right. Here to help us sort it out is my new friend, Dick Eide. He spent 34 years on Wall Street working for JP Morgan, and he was head of the bond department, and he also wrote a newsletter that talked about the economy and in particular, the Federal Reserve. Dick, welcome to The Truth.
Happy to be here. Good to see you, John.
Thank you for joining us. So, which is it? How do you grade the Fed? I actually have tried to be a defender of Jerome Powell, but I also lost faith last fall when he lowered interest rates unexpectedly a half a point just before the November elections. I felt like many that was pure smacked of pure politics. And then he waited so long to give us any interest rate relief. So how do you assess the Fed's performance today?
Yeah, well, that's, you asked me this question off air, and I told you, and I will always tell you, that monetary policy, I think, is the hardest thing to grade the Fed on. The Fed does a number of jobs for this country, and monetary policy is by far the hardest and most subjective of them. So any Fed, whether it's run by Alan Greenspan or Paul Volcker or G. William Miller, Mariner Eccles, for God's sake, you can go back to the 30s. At best, our monetary policy tools are blunt, not terribly effective. They're usually late, meaning reactive rather than prospective. And Powell fits right in. He's blundered in policy pretty much the whole time he's been in the job. But I don't grade Jay Powell on that, even though I do grade him quite low. It isn't because of monetary policy. It's because of the other things the Fed does that he did so poorly at. Number one is communication. Communication is the most important single thing they do. They have an effect on their policies that have nowhere near the effect on markets and on people's attitude towards the economy anywhere near as much as what they say. And he has just been so backwards in his communications that I can't give him any credit, because I don't think he's been honest, and I think he has been, sometimes worse than that, actually misleading. So that's why I give him low marks.
Well, we know that the notion of cycles is not just a dreamed up thought. They are real. Since the 20s, we have seen economic cycles. Where do you put the United States and really the world today? We don't live on an island any longer. Where do you put us in terms of an economic cycle?
Yeah, and I would make a distinction between the growth cycle, meaning what's going on in the real economy, and the credit cycle. I mean, in the credit cycle, we've been so expansionary for so long that we have to be somewhere near the end of an expansionary credit policy. It really started with the mortgage crisis, where we intentionally went off the rails to try and solve a short-term problem. Short-term problem meaning that my bank and several others were technically bankrupt. So they had to solve that problem to get us out of that mess. And they flooded the zone with liquidity and capital. They forced a lot of mergers. And ever since then, it's been one form or another of credit joyride. Credit spreads are very narrow. Yields are far lower than the historical average relative to inflation and relative to growth. They still are, even after all these years and after a certain amount of tightening for a bad bout of inflation. So that cycle, I think, is is very far along, and that we will go into a period at some point where credit distinctions are made, bankruptcies are allowed to happen, failures occur, and you'll get a sorting out in the credit markets again, where strong credits borrow at favorable terms and weak credits borrow, if they can get in at all, they borrow expensively. The economic cycle itself is, I think, is a lot faster than the credit cycle because it doesn't rely at all on previous experience. The reason the credit cycle takes so long to play out is that if the Fed comes to your rescue every single time when you run into a bunch of bad loans, that bankers are never going to stop making bad loans. That's what we do as bankers. We make loans, and if we get away with making lousy ones with good spreads in them, we'll do that. So that isn't going to stop. Whereas the economic cycle has got so many more factors in it, right? I mean, we talk about it every day: trade, tariffs. Trump's trying to get us back to where we have a much better balance between our ability to export and our ability to import, right? So that becomes a huge factor. Labor market conditions. I don't know. I could argue that in the grand cycle, we're at a very exciting stage in the U.S. economy. We have reasonably full employment. We have a labor force that is not going on strike every other day, which is a terrific thing. We have access to resources better than ever now that Trump's back in. With drill baby drill and all that. And of course, the big kahuna is AI, right? So I would say that we are in the midst of in terms of the big cycle in economics, we're in the midst of a massive expansion.
Well, that would seem like an optimistic outlook to me, which I share, by the way. But then you listen to these people that I really like and respect, like Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, and Ray Dalio, who is has one of the biggest hedge funds in on Wall Street,
and a great trader, by the way, a great trader.
And Jeremy Grantham, who is a billionaire several times over. Michael Burry, who was the
Big
inspiration
Short.
for The Big Short, the movie and bestseller. They're all predicting doom and gloom. They say that we are on the verge of a bubble and that the whole thing is going to go crash and burning any second now. Now, the only problem with that is they've been saying it for 5 years. And when Biden became president and I listened to these guys tout their doom and gloom, I actually chose to go into the equity market and sell some of my positions because I felt like I was too far out on the risk curve and was leveraged. Now I regret that I did that because I left a lot of gains on the table. So the question is, are these guys right? Are they onto something, or are they going to be like the proverbial broken clock and they'll be right twice a day in the big scheme of things as relates to the economy?
Yeah, great question. And of course, that's one the Fed has to look at all the time. Is when people are talking doom and gloom, are they talking asset prices or are they talking about the real economy? That list that you just read off are some of the great asset price geniuses of our generation, John. And what I have found in a long career of working with those guys, trading with them, having to listen to them, they regrettably had to listen to me, that a lot of times those two issues are conflated. And what they probably mean when they give that doom and gloom thing is they're referring to asset prices. The real economy is subject to one of the greatest reversion to mean trades of all time. Basically, we're alive, we're healthier than we've ever been. Most of us go to work. The kids mostly go to school. At the margin, there's problems with all these things, but the economy has a momentum of its own. If you look at the 1930s, which was, doom and gloom in spades, most people, it was very high unemployment rate, but most people were working and going to school and going and seeing the doctor and doing what we all do every day.
So you talk about asset class. Aren't a lot of those assets propped up by debt? And I mean, we were seeing unprecedented debt all across the globe. Nations are borrowing like they've never borrowed before, like drunken sailors. Consumers are borrowing. Institutions are borrowing. It seems to me that the real threat is the amount of over leverage that people have taken on.
Well, we're living proof. The U.S. and this Federal Reserve are living proof that that's not a problem at all. Because when you have too much debt, you simply reflate and debauch the currency, which is what we've done. So anybody who's issued debt that's payable in a fiat currency, as long as they have the government at their backs, has no problem whatsoever.
Well, Jerome Powell did say that he was going to stop buying bonds.
Well, it'll be interesting.
That's a way of propping up the economy, is it not?
Yeah, no, it's there was no excuse for QE when they did it, and there's still over $6 trillion of it on the books, and there's still no excuse for it. Look, all they did when they did that was carve out at its peak $10 trillion that the U.S. government never had to borrow. Instead of going into the market and borrowing it like most people have to do, they just put it on account over at the Federal Reserve. The Reserve printed the money to pay for it and said, oh, it's now an asset on our balance sheet. So it's the classic debtor's trick of turning a liability, a debt, into an asset. We just changed it. We changed the name and put it on the books of an instrumentality of the government rather than the Treasury.
Well, and it gave us 9% inflation in the process, right?
It sure did. Well, I mean, among other things, but yes.
Well, I've got the impression, I'm optimistic, as I think you made the case for. AI obviously is a big stimulus. Some people say that we're approaching a bubble. I don't believe that. I think we're approaching the point where we're actually going to start to see a return on the investment in AI, particularly in the realm of robotics. I want one. I can tell you, I'm going to get me a little pet robot as soon as they're commercially available at a price I'm willing to pay. But and at the same time, it seems to me that President Trump is literally remaking the U.S. economy. He has imposed tariffs like we've not seen in decades, resulting in a projected $650 billion of newfound revenue. The big, beautiful bill gave tax breaks, codified the 17 Trump tax breaks. We've got energy costs that are coming down rapidly, coupled with a $15 trillion that has been pledged in new investment in the United States as we remake our manufacturing sector. Finally, Jerome Powell gave us some interest rate relief, which was the last brick in the mosaic, I feel like. Doesn't that all spell the entrance of a golden age?
Yeah, no, that's a good rundown on the positives. And as long as you don't get a rekindling of inflation while these wonders to perform are all occurring, then you're fine. You're out of the woods. The fact that the Fed has not hit its own imposed target of an upper band of 2% on inflation, the fact that they haven't hit it in 2 years, some people, Ray Dalio would be a good example, don't think that's really a great track record to start easing money and expanding again on. It's like, whoa, Nellie, let's at least show that we mean, when Powell says almost every time he speaks, we are committed to full employment and stable prices. Well, we already know the stable price thing is BS, because stable prices is no price changes. The Fed officially adopted 2% because they didn't like managing to stable prices. It was too much risk of deflation, which they see as a real problem. So they changed it to 2%, but they haven't hit that target in 5 years either. So what Powell should be saying every time he opens his mouth is we're committed to reasonably full employment and unstable prices that inflate at the rate of 2% a year. And that's because it isn't a two-direction thing. It's only up.
But there is a little problem in all of that, isn't there? And that would be unemployment. I heard you say earlier that you thought we were approaching full employment, but it ticked up to 4.3% in the last numbers that we were given. And that's a long ways from the 3.3% unemployment that we enjoyed under Trump 1.0.
Yeah.
So don't we have another 33% of jobs that could be filled if that analysis is correct? And it's just 1%, but it sure feels like a lot if you're among the 1%.
Well, with no disrespect to people who are unemployed, in macroeconomics, you would tend to look at the aggregate numbers. 4.3 I'm showing my age here. I think of bad unemployment as 7%. Pretty bad is north of 5. Amazing is 3, and 4 is as good a target as any. There's a lot of literature on this, John. What is full employment in the U.S.?
And how many people actually are unemployed who are looking for a job?
And exactly, discouraged workers are probably quite low, actually. Again, that's the conundrum that Powell, because of prior bad acts, finds himself in. He's basically having to ease into a failed price target. He hasn't hit his price target in 5 years. He's been the Fed chairman that entire time, right? And he's never hit it. And yet, like a wind-up doll, every time he gets up, he goes, and we're steadfast in our commitment to stable prices, which I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. It's a regurgitation of the dual mandate, full employment and stable prices, but there's nothing in his track record to suggest that he's ever really paid the slightest attention to that.
So the one thing in President Trump's formulation that I'm disappointed in is that he has not offered anything really in a meaningful way in terms of budget discipline. And I thought with Bessent and the Secretary of Commerce both talking about working towards a balanced budget, maybe there was some glimmer of hope, but I don't see anything. I haven't read or gotten any indications that they're even really making a step in that direction. I was hopeful that the tariffs, $650 billion, combined with DOGE, $250 billion. Now we're talking about $1 trillion. Now we're start talking about some real money that could afford meaningful budget discipline and debt relief. But I don't see any indication that they're even thinking about it. It seems to me that Trump is planning, or his strategy is to outrun it, that he's trying to raise the size of the ocean so that all the ships will benefit.
Yeah, and he said that many times, including when he was running. The only solution here is to grow your way out of it. And I think Bessent would say the same thing, not in a speech, but if he were talking with you just as I am right now. The debt bomb is real. The thing that list you read off earlier, the thing they're talking about is a real problem, but it's not that there's no solution to it. You simply have to show that you can grow faster than you're accumulating debt. You start to pay down debt. We did it in the 90s a little bit, and people will feel a lot better about the sustainable debt load.
Well, I would feel a lot better about it because we got $37 trillion in debt, and interest all of a sudden is the single largest line item in the federal budget.
Yeah, bigger than defense. Yeah.
Now, Rand Paul and Ron Johnson think that we're at a tipping point and that it's all going to collapse and come crashing down if we don't get serious about trying to curtail spending.
Well, and I think they're serious when it comes to cutting fat. See, the way I would view Trump is as he's a builder, he's an expander. That's his history. We're both New Yorkers. I had an opportunity to bank him once, didn't. The way he looks at the world is that it's there to be built upon and grown. So to expect him to be careful about debt and expansion, I don't think that's not the Donald Trump that I know. I would expect him to act as he is acting, which is let's get involved in AI, let's control that, let's put a big footprint on the world defense-wise, let's make sure we're not having to fight any back actions, because what we're really trying to do is get all this fresh investment here in the U.S., get our industries built back up, finally achieve some fair trade, where we have at least a chance to export something or build for export. Before it's all been rigged, right? I mean, he's absolutely correct. That was his best issue when he ran the first time, and it was best issue when he ran the second time. The American working man has been screwed by the people who own the businesses, right? And obviously, as a banker in New York, we were a lot closer to the people who owned the businesses, and we tended to support that kind of thing, even though we knew it was very bad for jobs and even worse for wages. Because when you start importing cheap labor from abroad, not the secondary effect or the tertiary effect, the first effect is that means American workers can demand less. Now they're competing against, the guy over in Vietnam or down in Haiti.
Well, it has never worked for our country. I mean,
Yeah.
going back to the 1800s when we brought slaves to America, we're still paying for that decision. And it has cost us in so many ways, both real and intangibly.
Yep.
Then we've done the same thing really by bringing Hispanics into the United States. I am in favor of allowing Hispanics in to fill jobs that no one else will step up to, principally in agriculture, harvesting crops, in construction, in hotels and hospitality and restaurants. I mean, every business that you go walk by has got a help wanted sign in front of it. And so depriving those business owners of an adequate labor force is not helping anybody. And if we can give a helping hand up to people in less advantaged countries and allow them to work here legally, I think it's a good policy. That's just the world according to John.
Yeah.
But there is another potential boon and problem looming that we talked about briefly, and that is AI. I mean, Musk says that his robot is going to do trivial, monotonous, repetitive, dangerous task. Well, I'm thinking that you could replace.
Sounds like trading bonds.
Sounds like some war wounds exposed there. But really, you can think about roofing, you can think about welding, you can think about the things that are patently dangerous that would be replaced by a robot. And I'm thinking that you could eliminate or you could fill all the unfilled jobs in the country if you can get a legitimately trained robotic force that could go out and do those jobs. But that then begs the question of what about the people that you then displace from those jobs?
Mhm.
So it does feel like a real conundrum to me.
Well, again, in aggregate terms, I wouldn't start worrying about that until I saw a big spike in unemployment that was directly attributable to AI. I think it's always possible to see the boogeyman, like, oh, it can do everything. It's wonderful. People are endlessly resourceful on how to use their time and something. I mean, would you have ever, John, this is a good one. You're a little younger than me, but we're kind of from that same generation. Would you have ever thought there was such a job as a TikTok influencer?
No.
No, me neither.
No, it actually, it looks like incredibly easy money to me. And I'm trying to figure out an angle because I'd love to be a star on TikTok. I just don't think our age group really appeals to the audience. That's the problem in that.
And all I mean is, here's kids that could otherwise have gone to work for JP Morgan and, learned how to do one of the things they do there. And they're going, heck no, I can do this right from home. I get a following. I get people sending me cash, Venmoing me cash for one thing or another. And all of a sudden I'm supporting myself as a TikTok influencer. So this is where I think there's some alternative theses about about what AI actually does. I think it changes the labor force, but whether it really diminishes it or not, or narrows it, I doubt. I think actually what we're going to find out is that you and I sitting here on this call, we can't come up with what the labor force is going to look like in 25 years from now.
Totally.
We'll just be wrong.
And to argue against the point that I was making, and I wasn't really advocating that position, I'm just asking the question. One answer to that is that there's been a lot of talk about a guaranteed minimum income for all Americans, and I think that could become a real potential if the hypothesis that I posed should prove to be true. But Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, said, don't worry about it. But in his company, they've got 40,000 programmers, and each one of them has an AI assistant. And so it's really like an executive assistant or an apprentice that actually helps them do their job. What is the result of that? Phenomenal increases in productivity.
Yeah, exactly. And which is, remember, that's what the internet did too. We got those big jumps in the 90s. You know, you look at non-farm productivity in the 90s, it's the best spike in the whole graph. I'm looking at a 60-year graph on that, and it all came off every time internet speeds doubled. You got another big pop in productivity. Well, AI is just another one of those speed changes on the storing and manipulation and retrieval of data. You know, it's the biggest one we ever saw, and it is going to have that effect.
So I want to go back to one thing that we were talking about earlier. The S&P 500 typically trades at about 15 times earnings. We just did a quick Google search, and it looks like the S&P, I don't believe this number. Anthony, who's a better producer than an economist, came up with 28 times earnings. Is that even remotely possible?
Yeah, it's in the 20s. I don't follow those multiples too much. I was trained by my customers not to. And they said the problem is those are always trailing earnings. And what the market is really doing is forecasting future earnings. So they never liked multiples as a measure of whether we're expensive or cheap. You know, these were hedge funds. I mean, these were serious players who just said, Dick, don't waste your time. Don't look at multiples.
Well, that's good insight that I lacked. So I thank you for
Yeah.
that. So interest rates are somewhere around 4.1%, I believe, for the Federal Reserve overnight interest rate.
Oh yeah, and the overnight, yeah. Right now the curve's very flat. Yep.
And so where we know where we are, we know where we've been. Where do you think we're going?
Steeper. I think the curve will be steeper. That's part of normalization is getting, if the person's going to take the risk to lend the money for longer term, they earn a higher rate. That's what's called a normal curve.
Sure.
Right. And it's
and we've had an inverted curve for several years now, right?
Exactly. And every time you have a normal curve, that enables the risk taker, the person who's actually making the investment either in 2, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, to judge, is that enough additional reward for me to go out and incur all the uncertainty that goes with time, right? Time equals uncertainty when it comes to rates and other volatile variables like that. When you have an inverted curve, it usually means some exogenous force has forced it into that shape. In this case, the exogenous force was today's topic, the Federal Reserve. They put not just $10 trillion on the books, they bought all long paper, 30 years, mortgage-backed securities, 20-year notes, and 10-year notes. And that's why I say it was an abomination when they did it, and it still is, because it created a weird set of incentives to invest. They were doing that intentionally. They were so afraid of the stock market crashing in over the mortgage crisis that they put QE in. If you recall this language, Bernanke called it the portfolio balance channel. And that was one of his theories for once you went beyond the zero bound in the Fed funds rate, and we went right to zero. So we were beyond that bound. What else can you do? What other tools do they have? And he found some precedent. I can't remember, it was Finland or someplace like that, that had pulled this in that very weak period right after World War II. And they did this thing of going out and buying long Finnish debt at the time, and it worked. Now, if you go back and look at the example he was citing, the whole purchase and then subsequent runoff of those securities back into the market, the whole thing only took 18 months. Last time I looked, we're in year 16 from the mortgage crisis. So this has become a permanent fixture that, God forbid, I mean, Powell should get at least some credit for knowing that that was not a good direction for the Fed to go, and at least right now, he's not making the situation any worse so far. You watch, if there's a crisis, they'll jump again. They'll do it again.
Dick, thank you so much for a great primer on our a snapshot on our economy and some real insights into the way that the institutions of our government work to keep the economy going. And if you like what you've heard from Richard Eide, you can enroll at the Florida Gulf Coast University and take his seminar on history, governance, and governance of the Fed and the Federal Open Market Committee. What a great opportunity to talk with you, Dick, and thank you so much for your generosity of time and your knowledge.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.